Suspicious of the changes in his children's behavior, a millionaire decides to investigate what's happening inside his own home. Disguised as a gardener, he witnesses his wife's silent cruelty and the children's daily suffering. But everything changes when he reveals his true identity before everyone, exposing a truth no one will ever forget. The sun was setting over the elegant skyscrapers of London when Graham Montgomery parked his Range Rover in the underground garage of the mansion in Kensington Gardens. He sighed deeply as he turned off the engine. At 45, he was one of the most respected businessmen in the country, owner of a construction company that erected buildings from Land's End to John O'Groats. But at that moment, his empire of concrete and steel seemed to weigh less than the unease in his chest. There had been something different about his home in recent weeks, something he couldn't quite name, but that he felt in the atmosphere, like an unpleasant perfume that lingers even after opening the windows. "Daddy's home," he announced, forcing a smile as he entered through the main door. The Italian marble reflected the light from the Austrian crystals of the monumental chandelier, but the silence that greeted him was disconcerting. Sophie, his 8-year-old daughter, usually ran into his arms as soon as she heard his voice. Luke, just 3, would normally follow her, with his clumsy steps and spontaneous laughter. Now nothing, just the echo of his own footsteps. Camilla, the housekeeper who had worked with the family for years, appeared discreetly. "Good evening, Mr. Montgomery. Dinner will be served in half an hour. Mrs. Eleanor is in her room getting ready." "Where are my children, Camilla?" "Sophie is in her room studying, sir, and little Luke is with the nanny." Graham frowned. Sophie had always been studious, but she usually took a break to greet him, and Luke, so young, was already under the nanny's care at this hour. He went upstairs towards his daughter's room. He knocked softly on the door. "Sophie, princess, may I come in?" Silence. After a few seconds, he heard light footsteps approaching, and the door opened slowly. Sophie was there, but her smile, once as natural as the sunrise, seemed rehearsed. "Hi, Dad." Her voice came out almost as a whisper. Graham knelt to be at the girl's eye level. He noticed something different in them, a dull sparkle where there had once been sparks of joy. "How was your day, my love?" "It was good." She looked away. "I'm doing homework. Do you need help?" "No, thank you. Eleanor said I need to learn to manage on my own." Eleanor, not mom or stepmom, just Eleanor. Graham noticed the change but didn't comment. "Can I see Luke before dinner?" Sophie hesitated for a moment, as if carefully considering her next words. "He's sleeping. Eleanor said he needed discipline for bedtime." At 7 p.m.? That was strange. Luke always stayed awake until after dinner, and the ritual of putting him to sleep was a special moment they shared. He kissed his daughter's forehead and went down to the master bedroom. Eleanor was sitting at the dressing table, carefully applying her makeup. At 38, she was a stunning woman, tall, elegant, with piercing green eyes that had captured Graham's attention since their first meeting, 2 years after his first wife Marianne's passing. "Good evening, darling." She smiled through the mirror. "How was the meeting with the investors?" "Productive." Graham approached. "Eleanor, is Luke already asleep? It's only 7 o'clock." She didn't interrupt her precise movements with the makeup brush. "Yes, I've implemented a new routine. Children need structure, Graham, especially now that I'm their mother. They were very undisciplined." "Undisciplined? Sophie has always been an exemplary girl and Luke is just a baby." Eleanor finally turned to face him, her expression soft, but her eyes firm. "Darling, trust me. I know what I'm doing. You yourself said you wanted me to take more responsibility with the children so you could focus on business. That's exactly what I'm doing." Graham hesitated. It was true that he had asked for more support with the children, especially now that the construction company was expanding to the Scottish Highlands, but something didn't feel right. "I just wanted to see him before bed." "You'll see him tomorrow. Now he needs to rest." She stood up gracefully. "Shall we have dinner? I asked the chef to prepare that lobster you love." During dinner, Graham watched Eleanor talk animatedly about the preparations for the charity gala, she would organize the following month. She was president of a foundation that helped needy children, an irony that did not escape him at that moment. Going upstairs to bed, Graham made a detour to Luke's room. He opened the door silently and saw his son sleeping, his little face illuminated by the rocket-shaped nightlight. He approached and noticed something strange. The teddy bear that Luke adored, a gift from his late mother, was nowhere to be seen. The boy never slept without it. In the days that followed, Graham began to pay more attention. Sophie, once outgoing and talkative, now barely spoke during meals. Luke seemed confused, as if he didn't understand why his routine had changed so drastically. And there was something in the looks the children directed at Eleanor. It wasn't love or respect, it was fear. One afternoon, arriving home early, he heard the sound of crying coming from the kitchen. He followed the noise and found Sophie being comforted by a young woman he didn't immediately recognize. "It's all right, dear, it was just a glass. Accidents happen." The young woman's voice was gentle, comforting. Noticing his presence, both started. "Mr. Montgomery." The young woman straightened quickly. "We didn't expect you so early." "And you are?" "Louise Thompson, sir. I started this week. I'm helping with cleaning and with the children when necessary." Sophie quickly wiped her tears and tried to smile. "Dad, I broke a glass. It was an accident." "It's all right, Princess." As Louise said, accidents happen. But something in his daughter's gaze deeply disturbed him. It was a look of relief that he was there, as if his presence represented protection. "Where's Eleanor?" "Mrs. Montgomery went out for lunch with friends. She should be back soon," Louise replied as she finished cleaning the shards. That night Graham couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in bed, watching Eleanor sleeping peacefully beside him. His mind was full of questions. Was he imagining things? Was it just the stress of business affecting his judgment? He decided to talk to Eleanor in the morning, but she dissuaded him with plausible explanations for everything. Sophie was just going through a phase of introversion, common in children after a new marriage. Luke was adapting to a more structured routine, beneficial for his development. All perfectly reasonable. But the following week, a phone call from Sophie's school changed everything. "Mr. Montgomery, we're concerned about Sophie. She has been very withdrawn, not participating in activities, and today, during PE class, we noticed marks on her arms. When questioned, she said she fell down the stairs, but..." Graham's blood ran cold. Marks? Sophie had never been clumsy. When he questioned Eleanor about the matter, she replied with contained irritation, "Please, Graham, children fall, children get hurt. If every parent was called to school for a scratch, no one would work." But Sophie never used to get hurt. Like this. "Well, maybe you didn't know her as well as you think. You were always too busy with your buildings and meetings." The words hit him like a punch. It was true that after the loss of his wife, he had plunged into work, but he always believed he had maintained a special connection with his children. That night in his office, Graham reviewed the mansion's security cameras. There was nothing compromising. Eleanor seemed the perfect stepmom when she knew she was being observed. But this only increased his suspicion. He needed to see beyond the facade. He needed to know what was happening when he wasn't present. It was then that a plan began to form in his mind. A drastic, perhaps even insane plan, but one that could reveal the truth. He would need help, careful preparation, and above all, courage to face whatever he discovered. Graham Montgomery, the powerful businessman accustomed to controlling everything, never imagined that his biggest challenge would be to discover what was happening inside his own home. The morning was clear in Kensington Gardens when a middle-aged man, unshaven and in simple clothes, walked through the gates of the Montgomery mansion. He carried a worn toolbox and walked with a slight hunch in his shoulders, very different from the impeccable posture that Graham Montgomery normally displayed. "Good morning, Mr. Anthony. I'm Ron, the new gardener. The agency sent me." The strong Scottish accent sounded convincing, the result of hours of practice in front of the mirror. The security guard, who had never seen his boss without his Italian suit, did not recognize Graham under the disguise. "Ah, yes. Mrs. Montgomery mentioned someone new would be coming. You can go in. Jim, the head gardener, will show you everything." Graham breathed, a sigh of relief as he walked through the gardens he himself had planned years ago. The plan was underway. Officially, businessman Graham Montgomery was in Edinburgh for a long business trip, expansion of the construction company to the north. In reality, he had checked into a modest hotel a few miles away from where he left every morning in his disguise. His trusted friend, the actor Paul Kingsley, was in charge of answering calls and participating in video conferences as if he were Graham, using an office identical to his, specially set up for the charade. Even Eleanor had been fooled during the video call the previous night. "Mr. Ron, welcome." Jim, a 60-year-old man who had worked on the property for decades, greeted him with a smile. "I'll show you where we keep the tools and explain the routine." Throughout the day, Graham worked in the gardens, observing the mansion from angles he had never considered before. From afar, he saw Sophie leaving for school, her expression too serious for a child her age. He noticed how Eleanor smiled and waved to her daughter in front of the driver, but her smile disappeared instantly when the car door closed. "This new lady is difficult, you know," Jim commented in a low voice while they pruned bushes. "Not like Mrs. Marianne, God rest her soul." Graham felt a pang in his chest upon hearing his late wife's name. "How so? Difficult?" "Oh, you notice these things. Very demanding, you know. Everything has to be her way, and the children, well, I've never seen little Sophie so quiet." In the afternoon, while watering the plants near the kitchen window, Graham saw Louise comforting Luke, who was crying silently. The boy pointed to the top of a cupboard where a teddy bear, the very one that had disappeared, was placed out of his reach. "I can't, my dear." Louise's gentle voice could be heard. "Your mother said you can only have your teddy bear back when you learn not to wet the bed." Graham felt his blood boil. Luke was only 3 years old. It was perfectly normal for him to still have nocturnal accidents. He controlled himself with difficulty not to go in and confront Eleanor immediately. In the following days, Ron became a constant presence in the mansion's gardens. Hard-working and discreet, he rarely drew attention, becoming almost invisible, exactly as planned. This invisibility allowed him to witness scenes he would never have seen as Graham Montgomery. He saw Eleanor shouting at Sophie for having left a book off the shelf. "Do you think we have staff to clean up your mess? At your age, I was already washing, ironing, and cooking." The girl, trembling, apologized repeatedly. He witnessed Luke being ignored when he asked for a hug, Eleanor pushing him away impatiently. "Go play, Luke. Can't you see I'm busy? Always wanting attention, just like your father." But it was on Thursday during a new, elegant lunch that Eleanor hosted for her friends from the charity circle that Graham witnessed something that truly horrified him. The children had been briefly introduced, like perfect angels from a model family. Sophie recited a poem in French, receiving compliments from the guests, while Luke remained quiet beside his sister, clearly intimidated. "Eleanor, such adorable children. You've worked miracles with them in such a short time," commented one of the ladies. "It's just a matter of discipline, dear. Children are like plants. They need structure to grow strong." Eleanor smiled, the perfect image of the dedicated stepmother. After the children left, Graham, who was working in the garden near the terrace, overheard the continuation of the conversation. "Between us," Eleanor lowered her voice, "it wasn't easy at all. The girl was a wild one, spoiled by her father. And the boy? A little tyrant, but I believe in traditional methods. A good smack never killed anyone." The friends laughed nervously, while Graham felt his body freeze. "Smacks? On his children? And Graham allows it?" asked one of the women. Eleanor gave a calculated laugh. "Graham's too busy building Britain to worry about domestic details. He gave me carte blanche to raise the children as I see fit, and frankly, he doesn't even notice the difference." That night in his hotel room, Graham could barely contain the tears of anger and guilt. How had he not noticed before? How had he allowed this to happen? The answer was painfully clear. His absence, his blind trust in Eleanor, his inability to see beyond the perfect facade she maintained. The next day, equipped with a small recorder hidden in his shirt pocket, Ron returned to work. He was determined to collect concrete proof of Eleanor's abuse before confronting her. around 10. In the morning, while working near the music room window, he heard Eleanor giving a lesson to Sophie. "No, no, and no, you're playing like a beginner." Eleanor banged on the table forcefully. The piano was a passion that Sophie had inherited from her biological mother. "Sorry, Eleanor, I'll try again." "Don't call me Eleanor, I'm your mother now, understood? Your mother." "But—" Sophie's voice trembled. The sound of a slap cut through the air. Graham almost dropped his tools. "No buts, your mother's gone and she's not coming back. The sooner you accept that, the better for all of us." At that moment, Louise entered the room. "Excuse me, Ma'am, may I serve Sophie some juice? She's been studying since early." "Nobody asked your opinion, Louise." Eleanor's voice was icy. "Sophie needs to learn that perfection requires sacrifice. When she plays the whole piece without mistakes, she can drink water. Not juice, water." "But, Ma'am, she's just a child. One more word and you're out." "Understood." Graham heard Louise's footsteps moving away, followed by the sound of the piano restarting, occasionally interrupted by Eleanor's harsh criticisms. At noon, when Eleanor left for an appointment, Graham took the opportunity to approach Louise, who was serving the children's lunch on the back veranda. "Is the boss always like this?" he asked casually, while pretending to examine a climbing plant. Louise looked around nervously before replying, "Not always. Only when Mr. Montgomery isn't here, that's when things get tough." "And the children, how do they cope?" "Sophie is strong, you know. She protects her brother as best she can, but she's becoming more withdrawn. And little Luke, sometimes I think he's forgotten how to smile." Graham felt a lump in his throat. "And no one does anything?" "What can we do? Mrs. Montgomery has contacts all over London. One word from her and no one will hire us again. Besides, who would believe it? She's the perfect society lady, organizer of charity events." Louise sighed. "But I don't give up. I do what I can for the children." "Like what?" "I save food when she leaves them without dinner. I comfort them when they cry secretly. Sometimes I even disobey direct orders to protect them." Louise smiled sadly. "I can't change their world, but I can be that island of kindness in the storm." At that instant, Graham knew he had found an ally. He couldn't reveal his identity, but perhaps he could count on Louise's help when the time came to confront Eleanor. During the rest of the week, he continued collecting evidence. He recorded Eleanor confessing to a friend on the phone that fear works better than love in raising children. He documented how she manipulated appearances, transforming herself into the perfect stepmother when there were visitors or when she spoke to Graham via video. The decisive moment came when, in the second week of his disguise, he found Sophie crying, hidden in the back garden. "What's wrong, little one?" he asked gently, maintaining his Scottish accent. Sophie hesitated, but something in the gardener's kindness made her trust. It's my mum's birthday today, my real mum. I made a drawing for her, like I do every year." She showed him a crumpled paper. "But Eleanor found it and—" Sophie couldn't finish. Graham took the paper with trembling hands. It was a colourful drawing of a long-haired woman surrounded by hearts, with the inscription, "I love you, Mummy. Miss you." It was torn in half, mended with adhesive tape. At that moment, Graham Montgomery made his decision. It was time to end the disguise and confront Eleanor. His children had suffered too much for too long. The gardener Ron had fulfilled his mission. It was time for the father to return. Friday morning dawned with a tense atmosphere at the Montgomery mansion. Eleanor had announced an important charity lunch that would take place right there, where several prominent figures of London society would be present. According to her, it would be the perfect opportunity to show the world the exemplary family we've built. Graham, still in the role of Ron, was tasked with preparing the garden for the event. As he worked under the strong sun, his mind elaborated the final plan. After almost 2 weeks infiltrated in his own home, he had sufficient evidence of Eleanor's mistreatment. The recorder in his pocket contained hours of revealing conversations and testimonies from the staff. "Mr. Ron?" Louise's soft voice interrupted his thoughts. She approached with a glass of water. "It's very hot today." "Thank you, lass." Graham accepted the glass, maintaining his Scottish accent. Louise looked around to make sure they were alone. "Eleanor's impossible today. She said that if the lunch isn't perfect, There will be consequences. Consequences? For the children, she always uses them as bargaining chips, you know. If something goes wrong, they pay. Louise sighed. Sophie's inside, rehearsing what she'll say to the guests. The poor thing memorized a whole speech about how happy she is with her new mummy. And the boy? Luke's hiding in his room. He spilled juice on the outfit Eleanor had picked out, and she was furious. Louise lowered her voice even further. She threw his teddy bear in the bin again. Graham's blood boiled. That teddy bear was the last gift Marianne had given her son before. She passed away. It was Luke's most precious object. Did you manage to get it back? Louise nodded. I always do. I wait until she leaves and get it back. I think she's noticed, but pretends not to know. It's like a cruel game. And Mr. Montgomery? Doesn't he call to check on his children? Graham tested, wanting to understand how Louise saw the situation. He calls every day, but Eleanor always puts the phone on speaker. The children can't say what's really happening. Louise shook her head. You know, I shouldn't speak ill of the boss, but I think he should pay more attention. How can such an intelligent man not realize something's wrong? The words hit Graham like a slap. She was absolutely right. Perhaps he realizes now, he murmured softly. What do you mean? Nothing, lass. Just thinking aloud. Louise observed the gardener for a moment. There was something familiar about him, something in his gaze when he spoke of the children. You know, Mr. Ron, sometimes I think these children need a miracle. Perhaps the miracle is closer than you imagine, Graham replied enigmatically. Inside the mansion, preparations for lunch were in full swing. Hired chefs occupied the kitchen, florists arranged spectacular displays, and Eleanor supervised everything with eagle eyes. Sophie, come here now, her voice echoed through the house. The girl appeared quickly, wearing a formal navy blue dress. Yes, Eleanor, I mean Mum. Your hair is a mess. I already said I want it perfectly styled for today. Eleanor grabbed a brush and began pulling Sophie's hair with unnecessary force. And remember what we discussed. When people ask about our family, you will say that I'm very happy and that you're the best mum in the world, Sophie recited mechanically. And if someone asks about your biological mother, Sophie swallowed hard. I'll say I miss her, but that God blessed me with a wonderful new mother. Exactly. And Luke. He'll say he loves you very much and that he's the happiest boy in the world. Eleanor smiled, satisfied. Perfect. You're such clever children when you try. Her sweet tone contrasted with the force she was still applying with the brush. And if you behave well today, perhaps I'll allow you to talk to your father tonight without the speakerphone. Sophie's eyes lit up briefly, the first genuine expression she had shown in days. At noon, the first guests began to arrive. Businessmen, politicians, celebrities, the cream of London society was present. Eleanor greeted them as a perfect hostess, radiant in her designer dress. Ron worked discreetly in the flower beds near the main drawing room, strategically positioned to observe the event through the French doors, open due to the heat. He saw Eleanor introduce Sophie and Luke to the guests, displaying them like trophies. The children smiled and played their roles perfectly, although Graham could see the terror in his son's eyes when Eleanor placed her hand on his shoulder. Not a gesture of affection, but a silent reminder of what would happen if he failed. During lunch served on the large terrace overlooking the gardens, everything seemed to be going according to Eleanor's plan. The guests praised the food, the decor, and especially the perfect family she had built. Eleanor, you are an example to us all, commented a senator's wife. Taking on 2 children and turning them into little angels. It must be very rewarding. It's my greatest pride, Eleanor replied, smiling as her perfectly manicured nails caressed Sophie's arm with pressure visible only to those observing closely. It was then that the inevitable happened. Luke, sitting next to his sister, reached for his glass of juice and in the movement knocked over a wine glass that shattered on the marble floor. The silence was instantaneous. Eleanor's face transformed for a fraction of a second, a flash of fury that soon gave way to a comprehending smile. Accidents happen, she said to the guests. but her eyes conveyed a very different message to the boy. Luke began to tremble visibly, and Sophie held his hand under the table. "Louise, clean this up immediately," Eleanor ordered. As Louise knelt to pick up the shards, Eleanor took advantage of the guest's distraction to whisper in Luke's ear, "You'll regret this later, you clumsy boy." Graham, observing everything, felt his heart clench. The recorder in his pocket captured every word, but at that moment he realized he didn't need any more proof. It was time to act. In the afternoon, after the guests had left, Eleanor gathered the staff in the main room. The event was a success, but there were unacceptable failures. Her tone was icy. "Louise, why was little Luke given juice? I specifically ordered him to drink only water." "Forgive me, Mom, I thought he was thirsty and—" "You're not paid to think anything," Eleanor interrupted her. "Your job is to follow orders. This is a formal warning. One more mistake and you're fired." "But Mom, he's just a child," Louise dared to argue. "A child who needs to learn discipline." Eleanor approached, intimidating. "And you are interfering with my authority as a mother." "With all due respect, Ma'am, what you're doing isn't discipline, it's cruelty." A heavy silence fell over the room. The other staff looked at the floor, avoiding involvement. Eleanor seemed shocked by the employee's audacity. "You're fired now, pack your things and leave my house in 15 minutes. Louise did not back down. "The children need someone to defend them." "The children are mine now," Eleanor hissed, "and they don't need an interfering maid. Get out. And you can forget about any references. I'll personally make sure you don't work in any decent house in this city." It was at that moment that Graham, still dressed as Ron, entered the room. "I don't think so, Eleanor." Everyone turned, surprised by the gardener's intrusion. Eleanor frowned. "What's the meaning of this? Who allowed you in?" "Here, Anthony," she called the security guard. Graham took a step forward, removing his cap and fake beard. "No need to call anyone, Eleanor. I'm in my own home." The shock was visible on everyone's face, especially Eleanor's, who instantly paled. The staff looked on astonished, unable to believe that the quiet gardener of the past 2 weeks was, in fact, the boss. Graham, what does this mean? You should be in Edinburgh," Eleanor stammered, her composure crumbling. "I never left London, Eleanor. I spent the last 2 weeks watching how you treat my children when you think no one's watching." This is absurd. Are you mad? Disguising yourself as a servant in your own home?" "No, Eleanor. Mad would be continuing to allow you to mistreat Sophie and Luke." Graham took the recorder from his pocket. "I have everything recorded here. Every shout, every threat, every moment of cruelty." Eleanor tried to regain control. "Graham, darling, you're interpreting everything wrong. Discipline isn't cruelty, Enough lies!" Graham's voice thundered through the room. "Discipline isn't humiliating a child. It's not depriving them of food. It's not destroying the last link they have with their deceased mother." His voice faltered at this point. "This is abuse, Eleanor, and it's over." At that moment, Louise noticed something at the top of the stairs. Sophie was there, holding her brother's hand, both watching the scene with wide eyes. "Daddy?" Sophie's voice was just a whisper. "Is it really you?" And for the first time in weeks, a genuine smile lit up Graham Montgomery's face. "Daddy!" Sophie ran down the stairs with Luke right behind, his little feet stumbling on the steps. Graham opened his arms, kneeling to receive them. The impact almost knocked him over as the children threw themselves into his embrace, clinging to him like shipwreck survivors to a piece of wood. "You're back, you're really back," Sophie repeated between sobs, her face buried in her father's shoulder. Luke said nothing, just squeezed Graham's neck tightly, as if he feared he might disappear again. The familiar scent of his father's cologne seemed to calm him, even amidst the confusion. Eleanor watched the scene with a mixture of anger and calculation in her eyes. Her fingers squeezed the edge of the table so hard that her knuckles were white. "Children," she tried, her voice suddenly sweet, "why don't you go play upstairs while your father and I talk? There must be a misunderstanding here." "There's no misunderstanding at all," Graham replied firmly, still hugging his children, "and they don't need to leave. This conversation concerns them as much as us." Eleanor's face hardened for an instant, but she quickly regained her controlled expression. "Graham, let's be reasonable. What you did is completely irrational. Spying on your own wife, disguising yourself as an employee. Is that the behavior of someone mentally stable? Don't try to twist the situation, Eleanor. Graham stood up, holding Luke in his arms, while Sophie clung to his leg. I've seen enough, I've heard enough. And what exactly do you think you saw? Eleanor crossed her arms, adopting a defensive posture. A stepmother trying to impose limits on children who clearly need them. Someone trying to bring order to a house where the children did whatever they wanted. Order. Graham's voice rose, but he took a deep breath, controlling himself because of the children. Do you call it order, to leave an 8-year-old without dinner because she spilled a glass, or to hide a 3-year-old boy's teddy bear as punishment for wetting the bed? That's not discipline, Eleanor, it's cruelty. Eleanor laughed humorlessly. You were always too soft on them, Graham, that's why they needed a firm hand. Firm hand? Graham squeezed Luke protectively against his chest. You had no right. I had every right. Eleanor interrupted him, raising her voice. You put me in the role of their mother. You said you trusted me to raise them while you expanded your businesses. Or have you forgotten that? The staff remained motionless, like statues observing the confrontation. Louise took a step forward, instinctively moving closer to the children. I trusted you to love them as I love them, Graham replied, his voice now low and controlled. Not to terrorize them, not to erase the memory of their mother. Oh, of course, Saint Marianne. Eleanor practically spat the name. Everything always comes back to her, doesn't it? Your perfect first love, the perfect mother, the perfect wife. How could I compete with a ghost? For a moment, silence filled the room. Graham looked at Eleanor as if seeing her for the first time. So that's what this is about? He asked slowly. Jealousy? You mistreated my children because of jealousy of Marianne? Eleanor did not respond. Directly. Instead, her face took on a calculating expression, and she changed strategy. Graham, darling. Her voice softened dramatically. Perhaps I was a little severe at times. I admit it. But we're talking about isolated incidents that you're exaggerating. She took a step towards him. We can resolve this. We can go to a family therapist. I can change my approach. Sophie squeezed her father's leg harder, partially hiding behind him as Eleanor approached. This small gesture told Graham everything he needed to know. No, Eleanor, it's over. What? It's over. Our marriage, this farce, everything. Graham was surprisingly calm. Now, I've already contacted my solicitor. The divorce papers are being prepared. Eleanor's face contorted into an expression of fury that she could no longer contain. You can't do this to me. Do you know who I am in this city? Do you know the humiliation this would cause me? You should have thought of that before you turned my children's lives into a living hell. Your children? Eleanor laughed bitterly. Do you really think you were a present father, Graham? You saw them for what, an hour a day, sometimes not even that. You spent weeks traveling on business. Who do you think looked after them all this time? Mistreating them isn't looking after them, Louise intervened, unable to restrain herself. And Mr. Montgomery has always been a loving father, even from a distance. Everyone in this house knows that. Eleanor shot a venomous glance at the maid. You? I should have guessed you'd be involved in this. You probably filled his head with lies about me. I didn't need help to see the truth, Eleanor, Graham replied. I just needed to be present, observing, and what I saw was enough. Eleanor seemed cornered, but still wasn't willing to give up. And now what? You'll throw me out of my own home? You'll ruin my reputation based on illegally obtained recordings? This isn't your home, Graham replied calmly. It never was. And as for your reputation, that will depend entirely on how you handle this situation. He paused significantly. I have more than enough evidence of your behavior, Eleanor. I can make it public or keep the matter private. The choice is yours. The implicit threat hung in the air. Eleanor was intelligent enough to understand what was at stake. Her position in society, her work with the charity foundation, her carefully constructed image, everything could collapse. You wouldn't dare, she challenged, but her voice betrayed uncertainty. For my children, I'd dare much more. Graham's gaze was implacable. Now, you have two options. You can leave discreetly, accept the terms of the divorce that my solicitor will propose, and go live your life away from us. or you can fight, and I will use every recording, every testimony, every piece of evidence I collected in these 2 weeks." Eleanor looked around at the faces of the staff who were witnessing everything. She saw the determination in Graham's eyes, the fear in the children's eyes. Slowly, the reality of her situation began to penetrate her armor of self-confidence. "How long do I have to leave?" she asked finally, her voice cold. "Until the end of the day. A car will be waiting to take you to a hotel. Your personal belongings will be sent later." Graham showed no emotion now. "Camilla will accompany you while you pack your things." Eleanor cast one last look at the children, who visibly shrunk. For a moment, something akin to regret passed through her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by indifference. "You'll regret this, Graham. No woman will want to take on your problematic children after they know how you treat your wives. I'd rather be alone for the rest of my life than subject my children to someone like you again," he replied simply. Eleanor opened her mouth as if to say something more, but changed her mind. With one last cold glance, she turned and went upstairs, followed by Camilla. When she disappeared to the upper floor, Graham finally let out the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He knelt again to be at his children's height. "It's all right now," he murmured, embracing them. "It's all right. Daddy's here and he's not going anywhere." Sophie looked at him with teary eyes. "You knew, didn't you? That's why you disguised yourself as Ron?" Graham nodded. "I felt that something wasn't right, that you weren't happy, but I needed to see for myself what was happening when I wasn't around." "Was that why you talked to me in the garden?" Sophie asked, remembering the moments when the gardener had been kind to her. "Yes, Princess, I wanted to be close to you, to protect you, even if you didn't know it. Was me." Luke, who until then had remained silent, finally spoke. "Ron brought my teddy bear back." Graham smiled, fighting back tears. "Yes, champ, and no one will take your teddy bear from you again. I promise." The other staff began to disperse discreetly, giving the family some privacy. Only Louise remained close, her face reflecting a mixture of relief and emotion. Graham looked at her over the children's heads. "Thank you," he said simply, "for protecting them when I couldn't." Louise shook her head. "I didn't do anything special, sir, just what any decent person would do." "No," Graham disagreed. "You risked your job, your reputation. That's much more than most would do." He paused. "And please call me Graham." A slight blush colored Louise's cheeks, and she looked away, embarrassed. The moment was interrupted by Luke, who tugged at his father's sleeve. "Will Eleanor come back?" he asked, the fear evident in his childish voice. "No, my love." Graham kissed the top of his head. "Eleanor won't come back. Never again." Sophie looked at her father with a seriousness beyond her age. "You lied to us. You said you were Ron." Graham sighed. "Yes, Princess. I lied, and I apologize for it. It was wrong, even if my intention was to protect you." He looked directly into his daughter's eyes. "I promise I'll never lie to you again." Sophie considered this for a moment, then nodded gravely. "Okay, but you also have to promise you won't travel so much anymore." "I promise." The answer was immediate and sincere. "From now on, you are my #1 priority." Outside, the sound of a car departing was heard, Eleanor leaving the Montgomery mansion for the last time. No one moved to look out the window or say goodbye. Instead, Graham stood up, still carrying Luke, and extended his hand to Sophie. "How about we go get a snack? I bet you're hungry." Sophie smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. "Can we have ice cream before dinner?" "Today," Graham responded with a wink, "we can do anything we want." As the family headed for the kitchen, Louise watched them with a discreet smile. The storm had passed, but the rebuilding would be a long process. There were wounds to heal, trust to restore. But seeing Graham with his children, she knew they would get through it together. What none of them noticed was the small object Eleanor dropped purposely on the stairs as she left. A USB drive containing information she considered her insurance. The main battle might have ended, but Eleanor Prado was not someone who accepted defeat easily. And as her car drove away from the mansion, she was already planning her next move. 3 months had passed since Eleanor's dramatic exit from the Montgomery mansion. At first, the solicitors for both parties fought a fierce battle behind the scenes. Eleanor threatened to expose alleged irregularities in Graham's business, information she had collected during their marriage. In return, he held the recordings of the mistreatment as his own weapon. In the end, a silent agreement prevailed. Eleanor would receive generous financial compensation provided she signed a confidentiality agreement and committed to never again attempt contact with the children. For someone like her, money spoke louder than revenge. A week after signing the papers, she embarked for the continent, where, according to society newspapers, she was starting a new chapter in her philanthropic career. The truth behind the headlines mattered little to the Montgomery family. What mattered was that she was gone. The mansion life gradually found a new rhythm. Graham had drastically reduced his business trips and reorganized his schedule to be present for breakfast and dinner every day. Important meetings were rescheduled if they coincided with school presentations or the children's doctor's appointments. The construction company continued to prosper, but now with a CEO who understood that his biggest project was rebuilding his family. On a sunny Saturday morning, the mansion's garden was particularly busy. A table had been set up under the large oak tree, decorated with colorful balloons and a homemade cake. Luke was turning 4, and for the first time in a long time he seemed genuinely happy. "Daddy, look what I made." The boy ran across the lawn displaying a paper airplane he had folded himself with Sophie's help. "Wow, that's amazing, champ," Graham applauded, watching his son with pride. Sophie, now 9, was sitting at the table helping Louise organize the small chocolate treats. Her face had regained its color, and her smile, once so rare, was frequent again. "Do you think I put too many chocolate treats?" the girl asked, critically analyzing her work. Louise smiled. "Chocolate treats are never too many, Sophie." The relationship between Louise and the family had transformed significantly in recent months. After Eleanor's departure, Graham had officially promoted Louise from domestic helper to housekeeper, with a substantially higher salary and new responsibilities. But in practice, her role was much more important. She had become a constant and comforting presence for the children, a confidant for Sophie, and a maternal figure for Luke. "Mr. Montgomery, the cake is ready for us to sing Happy Birthday whenever you wish," Camilla announced, coming out of the kitchen with a tray of snacks. "I think we can wait a little longer." "We're still waiting for a few guests," he replied, consulting his watch. The party was small and intimate, just a few school friends, the children of some construction company employees, and the family. Graham had decided that it was better that way, a safe environment where Luke could really have fun without the pressure of an elaborate social event like Eleanor used to organize. Sophie approached her father, sitting beside him on the garden bench. "Dad, do you think Mummy would be happy seeing us now?" Graham put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. He had encouraged the children to talk openly about Marianne, keeping her memory alive through photos and stories. "I'm absolutely sure, Princess. Your mother always wanted to see you happy, above all else." Sophie nodded, thoughtful. "Sometimes I dream about her. In the dream, she's smiling." "She had the most beautiful smile in the world," Graham commented, feeling the familiar pang of longing. "And you inherited that smile from her." On the other side of the garden, Louise watched the scene discreetly, while arranging the last details of the party. There was something in the way she looked at the Montgomery family, a mixture of affection and respectful distance. She knew her place, but she couldn't deny that, over these months, she had developed a special affection for all of them. Graham had also noticed this dynamic. Several times he caught himself observing Louise when she didn't realize it, the gentle way she spoke with the children, her spontaneous laughter, the dignity with which she performed her work. At 32, Louise Thompson was a strong woman who had earned his respect in ways he never would have imagined. The sound of the doorbell interrupted his thoughts. Luke ran excitedly towards the house. "It must be Pete," the boy shouted, referring to his best friend from school. "Wait, Luke, let Anthony answer first," Graham called, getting up to follow his son. But it wasn't Pete at the door. It was an elegant lady, with grey hair and impeccable posture, Mrs. Clara Thompson, Louise's mother. "Good morning, Mr. Montgomery," she greeted formally. "I hope I'm not disturbing." "Not at all, Mrs. Thompson. Please come in. Louise is in the back, helping with the party preparations." The lady entered, carrying a colorful package. "I brought a little gift for the birthday boy. Louise talks so much about this little boy that I feel as if I know him." Graham smiled, leading her to the garden. "I'm sure Luke will love it, and I'm glad you came. Louise speaks very highly of you." "Does she really?" Mrs. Thompson observed him with curiosity. "She also speaks very highly of you, and the children, of course." There was something in the lady's tone that made Graham feel suddenly observed, as if she were evaluating his intentions. Before he could respond, they reached the garden, where Louise's eyes widened when she saw her mother. "Mum, I didn't know you'd be so early. I thought it best to arrive before the other guests to help," Mrs. Thompson replied, kissing her daughter. Then she turned to Luke, who was curiously observing the newcomer. "And you must be the birthday boy. Happy birthday, my dear." Luke smiled shyly, accepting the gift with a whispered thank you. As other guests began to arrive, the party came to life. Children ran through the garden, adults chatted in small groups, and the atmosphere was one of genuine joy. Luke, surrounded by friends and presents, seemed to be living the best day of his life. During the Happy Birthday song, Graham watched his family with a full heart. Sophie beside her brother, helping him blow out the candles. Luke, with his gap-toothed smile, clapping enthusiastically. And Louise, a little apart, recording everything with the camera he had given her, her face illuminated by a joy that seemed to reflect that of the family itself. After the cake, when the children dispersed to play again, Graham found a moment to approach Louise. "Thank you for all this," he said, indicating the perfectly organized party. "You did an incredible job." Louise smiled, adjusting the camera in her hands. "It's the least I could do. Seeing Luke so happy is reward enough. It's not just for today, it's for everything." Graham hesitated, aware that they were being observed by Mrs. Thompson from a distance. "In these past few months, you've been essential to us." Louise seemed uncomfortable with the compliment, looking away. "I'm just doing my job, sir." "Graham," he corrected her gently. "I thought we had gotten past that formality." "It's hard to change old habits," she replied with a shy smile. "Especially with my mum around, she's very traditional." Graham looked at Mrs. Thompson, who pretended not to be observing their conversation. "She seems like an admirable lady." "She is. She raised 4 children alone after my father abandoned us. She worked as a domestic helper her whole life to give us an education." Louise spoke with evident pride. "I guess I inherited that will to protect children from her. I understand now where your strength comes from." Graham paused, gathering courage for what he wanted to say next. "Louise, there's something I've been thinking, something I'd like to discuss with you when we have an appropriate moment." Louise's gaze met his, a silent question in her dark eyes. "Daddy, come see what Sophie made." Luke's voice interrupted the moment, and Graham stepped away with an apologetic smile. The afternoon progressed pleasantly. When the last guest said goodbye, Luke had already fallen asleep on the living room sofa, exhausted from so much playing. Sophie helped collect the gift-wrapping paper, while Louise and Mrs. Thompson organized the kitchen. Graham carried his sleeping son to his room, changed his clothes, and covered him carefully. He placed the teddy bear, now clean and restored, beside him and kissed his forehead. "Happy birthday, my little one," he whispered. Upon returning to the living room, he found Sophie leafing through a photo album. "They're photos of Mummy," she explained, showing an image of Marianne holding baby Sophie. "I found them at the back of the cupboard." Graham sat beside his daughter, putting his arm around her shoulders. "She was beautiful, wasn't she?" "Yes," Sophie agreed. "I don't think I'll ever forget her face." "And you shouldn't," Graham replied. "Your mother will always be a part of you, a part of us." Sophie turned a few more pages, then asked abruptly, "Dad, you like Louise, don't you?" The question caught Graham by surprise. "Of course I like her. She's a wonderful person. No, I mean, really like you liked Mummy." Graham felt his face flush. "Why are you asking that, Princess?" Sophie shrugged, with that childish perceptiveness that sometimes startled him. Because you look at her differently, and she also looks at you differently. Differently how? Like in the soap operas. Sophie smiled. And it would be nice, you know. Louise is good, not like Eleanor. She really cares about us. Graham remained silent for a moment, processing his daughter's words. It was surprising how children could see certain things with such clarity. Sophie, even if I like Louise that way, it doesn't mean she feels the same. And besides, it would be complicated. She works for us. Sophie closed the photo album. Adults always make everything complicated, but sometimes it's quite simple. She stood up, yawning. I'm going to sleep. Good night, Dad. Good night, Princess. Graham hugged her, thoughtful. After Sophie went upstairs, he remained in the living room, contemplating the conversation they had just had. Eventually, he stood up and walked to the kitchen, where he found Louise finishing putting away the last items. Has your mother left? He asked. Yes, Anthony took her home. She loved the party. Louise smiled, closing a cupboard. And Luke, did he sleep happily? Like an angel. I think it was the best birthday he's ever had. I'm glad. Louise began to untie her apron. If you don't need anything else, I'll also retire. Actually, Graham hesitated. Would you have a moment for that conversation I mentioned earlier? Louise stopped, her hands still on the apron tie. Of course. They moved to the back veranda where the spring night was pleasantly warm. The garden lights created a cozy atmosphere, and in the distance, the London skyline sparkled like a carpet of stars. It's about your work here, Graham began, choosing his words with care. I understand. Louise's face closed slightly. If there's something I'm not doing correctly— No, it's not that at all, Graham interrupted gently. In fact, it's the opposite. You have been extraordinary, more than we could have hoped for. Louise relaxed a little, but still seemed apprehensive. What I mean is that you've become much more than an employee to this family, Louise. You're part of it now. The children adore you. He paused, gathering courage. I admire you deeply. Louise's eyes widened slightly, and a subtle blush colored her cheeks. Sir Graham, I just did what any kind-hearted person would do. No, he disagreed firmly. Not just anyone would risk their job to protect children they barely knew. Not just anyone would rebuild the trust of a traumatized boy or become a confidant to a girl who lost her mother. You are special, Louise, and I'd like to explore the possibility of getting to know you better. Louise stared at him, seeming momentarily speechless. I know it's complicated, he continued. You work here. There's a social difference between us, and perhaps you don't even feel the same. But after everything we've been through, I've learned that life is too short not to be honest about our feelings. Louise finally found her voice. Graham, I feel something too, but you're right, it's complicated. I'm afraid of how it would affect my relationship with the children if it didn't work out. I understand your apprehension, he replied, and I respect it completely. I'm not asking for an answer now. In fact, I have a different proposal. What proposal? I'd like to invite you to dinner, not here, not as employee and boss, at a restaurant as two people getting to know each other outside of these roles. Louise smiled slowly. That I can accept. The relief and joy on Graham's face were evident. Great. How about next Friday? Friday would be perfect. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled only by the nocturnal sounds of the garden and the distant city. I think I should go now, Louise said finally. Tomorrow will be a long day of post-party cleanup. Of course, Graham agreed. Good night, Louise. Good night, Graham. As she walked away, Graham remained on the veranda, watching the starry sky. He didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt genuine hope. The pain of the past would always be there. The loss of Marianne, Eleanor's betrayal, the suffering his children had faced. But now there was also the possibility of healing, of a new beginning. In the silent mansion, the wounds of the past were beginning to heal. Sophie was smiling again as before. Luke spoke more and more, gradually losing his fear. And Graham, the man who had once disguised himself to discover the truth in his own home, could now finally be himself. A dedicated father, a man in the process of healing, someone who had learned the hard way that no wealth in the world compares to true family love. Meanwhile, upstairs, Sophie was standing at her brother's bedroom door watching him sleep. In her hand, she held a photo of her biological mother that she had separated from the album. Carefully, she placed it on Luke's bedside table, next to the teddy bear. "Good night, Mummy," she whispered. "Watch over us from up there, okay? I think things will be all right now." And that night, for the first time in a long time, everyone in the Montgomery mansion slept in peace, without fear of tomorrow. Dear listeners, we hope Graham and his children's story touched your heart. For more emotional stories like this, we have prepared a special playlist that explores family bonds and the strength of true love. Find it by clicking the link on the left. If this narrative moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Daily, we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the power of resilience. Don't miss our next content. We look forward to reading your comments on the Montgomery family's outcome.